Welcome, everybody, to the Global Earth Wisdom Call. People from all over the world, we welcome you and we invite you to join in the chat. And Sheila will be monitoring the chat and making comments, and you'll have an opportunity to raise questions or offer observations as Ann and I talk here. And I will introduce her briefly in just a moment. I'm recording part of this today. The main part of our call today will be live and live streaming, but a part of this is recorded, just so you know. I'm going to begin today. Judith will be singing later on, but I'm going to start today in the spirit of the book that we're considering, Walking with Bears. I'm going to sing a song that I learned through the tradition, Comanche tradition of Quanah Parker. And this is a Call the Spirit song. And he developed this song when he was leaving the hunter-gatherer lifestyle that his people had been involved in for the millennia. And he had never been defeated by the United States government. The United States government had killed most all of the horses of his tribe. The Comanches were probably, along with Genghis Khan, the greatest horse people in the whole story of the planet. And the United States government had killed most of their horses. They had tried to kill the food source, the buffalo, but there was a man who saw fit to sequester 50 of those buffalo that saved the bison herd for our continent. And in the midst of all of that, Quanah Parker had a spiritual breakthrough that was both a vision quest and eventually his own healing by a female shaman on the Texas-Mexico border. And in the midst of that healing of his own body and his beginning to get a vision of how to move from one paradigm to the next, this song came to him in a moment of spiritual inspiration, and it calls the Spirit song into our conversation for today. Way-a-hey-nay-ah, 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 yo, away-I-oh, 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 yo, away-I-oh, away-I-oh, away-I-oh. Way-a-hey-nay-ah, 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 yo, away-I-oh, away-I-oh, away-I-oh. So maybe that gives us a energetic context. I'm so happy to have Ann Baring with us today. Ann is the author of several books, but especially The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. Ann is a Jungian analyst, and in my humble estimation, one of the primary Jungian scholars of our planet. And so happy, Ann, to have you with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be here too, Will. And happy to read your book as well.
Yeah, well, the theme for today is actually three bears in the living room. They're the bears are taking the place of the elephants in the living room. And the three bears that are in our living room today that we're having difficult time as a culture wrapping ourselves around are, first of all, climate change. And next, another bear is nuclear holocaust, nuclear weapons. And then a third and perhaps even more difficult is ingesting prophetic hope in the midst of this world that seems to be crumbling around us. So let's just start with your response to the theme.
Well, there's no doubt that the three bears are very present and very large, looming very large. I think the climate change, I think it is beginning to penetrate. We've had a marvelous series of programs by David Attenborough recently called Blue Planet 2. And in them, he shows what's been done to the oceans. Now, millions and millions of people are watching those programs, and I'm hoping that something will really get through to them about how we must protect them from all the plastic that we're putting into them. And the plastic that's killing the whales and the turtles and the fish. They're swallowing it because they think it's fish and something nourishing, and instead it absolutely kills them. So that's coming through on that level of ordinary television, which is communicating with people. But I think that millions of people on the planet are sound asleep still. They simply are not aware. They're so busy with their ordinary lives, so busy with Facebook and Twitter, that they can't lift their eyes to what's around them. And that's very sad and very worrying for the sake of the planet. On the other hand, I think the earth is working to animate in all our souls the need for her protection and help coming from us. So that too is working in the background. And I do trust that that is growing, that awakening is growing, helped by people like yourself, like me, like thousands of others over the planet who are trying to wake people up. As the Hopi says, wake up. It's time to wake up.
Yes, it is. This is a time of awakening. And it's interesting because if you look at the visions that were gathered that I speak about in my book, there have been 4 civilizations that moved in a cycle according to these visions. So there's a beginning and a middle and an end as the civilizations move in a cycle. And each time human beings make enormous progress, and then their forms crumble, and out of that there's a remnant of people that wake up and provide the seeds to the next form of the human story. But in every one of those cases, according to the indigenous visions, what brings about the huge change is primarily climate change. So I think that's really important for us to get a hold of, is that what we're experiencing now, the planet has experienced, according to these prophetic visions, 4 other times.
Also, there have been great catastrophes, more than climate change. There's been devastation caused by catastrophic floods, or possibly something hitting the planet and causing the floods. So there's that as well. We could bear in mind whether it will happen this time. I hope it won't, because I would feel sorry for all the young life that's coming up now on the planet. But it's something to keep in the background, really, that catastrophe doesn't only mean climate change, it could mean real wipeout.
Yes, definitely. It could. And we'll circle back to that whole notion of climate change in a moment. But as well, before we leave that, I want to ask you, you're a Jungian analyst, and what do you think's going on with people so that there's a denial of of the science that is very clear what we're going through, but there's massive denial. I don't know how it is. You're in the United Kingdom, and I don't know how the denial is there, but in the United States, we're really struggling with that.
Well, there is almost complete denial at the level of government, which I think you have in the United States as well. And there's almost complete denial among the ordinary, what I call the ordinary scientific community, who simply refuse to look at the facts. On the other hand, there are many scientists who are warning and who are listened to by a few people like ourselves. But generally speaking, in the newspapers or the media, there's absolutely no, no awareness that what's happening might be dangerous, because if we destroy our habitat and our environment, that destroys us as well. And this hasn't percolated to the general consciousness at all. There is one person in government now who might be possibly beginning to wake up, but he's the only one.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
This is a huge problem.
That river called the denial flows freely, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but I think that one has to bear in mind Ken Wilber's chart, which says that people who are living at level 4 cannot understand what people living at level 6 are talking about.
Yes.
So, you know, we're trying to say, possibly coming from level 6, the environmental level, speaking to level 4, which are still thinking in terms of power and money and endless growth, which of course we can't have. But the two different levels don't communicate with each other. And this is a major problem. How do we get through to government that they have to look at things in a different way?
Yeah. So along that line, you know, we have the advantage here, although maybe not very many people have taken advantage of it. But one of the reasons I wrote this book was to speak of a memoir of my journey with my friend and teacher Berhard, as he began to question the very foundations of Western civilization and the story that we tell ourselves. And I wonder, as you read my book, what that seemed like to you, this questioning of the foundations of Western civilization.
Well, I thought that he was absolutely spot on, absolutely wonderful. And I thought what was fascinating was your gradual movement from being a psychiatrist and psychotherapist to really becoming a shaman yourself through his tuition, and how you went along with it as much as you could, but you had some resistance here and there. But then you had that extraordinary experience of the nightingale on one of your vision quest. And that really shifted your consciousness to awareness that you're within a greater reality that's speaking to you all the time if you learn how to listen to it. And I think that Berhard taught you that, and that was his great gift to you. And you took it on board. You were wise enough and humble enough to listen. And that is something that comes through your book, that you were willing to listen right the way through in everything that you did. And even when you were confronted by the establishment, as it were, and they said, how do you define psychotherapy? They wouldn't listen, they wouldn't hear, but you were able to listen. And that's something that was Berhard's gift to you, his great gift to you. And it's very moving to read your gradual conversion, which wasn't exactly a conversion, but an opening of your understanding and a moving into being able to experience life in a totally different way.
Yes, I would say I took that path mainly kicking and screaming and questioning every step of the way. And yet what you say is also true, that gradually it dawned on me that within the web of ecofields, the sacred web that the indigenous people describe and live, some of them, it dawned on me finally that this environment, this landscape, was actually interested in my own consciousness. That was an axial moment for me that you recall, when I was on this vision quest, and coming into my life was this small bird that made the sound, and the sound of the bird and the visual connected with me in such a way that it got underneath my Western rationalism and touched me at a primal level. And I think that's really one of the hopes that we have, is that the larger earth, Gaia herself, is interested in humans developing this connected consciousness.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. And is helping with that too, in actually almost giving us a kick in the pants.
Yeah.
To get going on that change of consciousness.
Yes.
And some of us have been able to respond to the call, and others haven't. But you make it so clear in the book, really, how the call comes on that island, you remember, with the storm. And you didn't know it at that time, but you just felt the power of the storm. And then later on, you come back to that memory, and that leads you back into this other kind of consciousness. You describe it very well, and also you describe something which, if I've got time to this, I'd like to just read you back this part, that something you wrote. Could it be, I asked myself, that the way to enlightenment is not to push away from the sensual, but rather to embrace the beauty of trees, spring water, and colorful birds? I had tried many approaches that encouraged me to be suspicious of attaching to the world. Now, here was an opening that told me it was through aware connection that I would find love and liberation. I think that's one of the most important passages in your book, and I was...
Yes, you know, you and I are in our elder time, and so we both have tried a lot of different approaches, and it had subtly the Abrahamic religions and even some of the meditation traditions had, what I had taken from that was that I needed to be suspicious of the sensual. I had to be suspicious of the deep beauty of connection. And that may or may not be the intent of those traditions, but that's what I had taken from it. And suddenly it dawned on me that just the opposite was true, that it was actually through interrelatedness that I could find some sense of my identity and who I am.
Yeah, well, I think you bring it through. I was reading today what I put on my website about the indigenous people. It's a statement by the indigenous people. And what they say in that is all life is sacred. We come into life as sacred beings. And when we abuse the sacredness of life, we affect all creation. So coming to that realization is slow. It may take a whole lifetime, but when we do realize it, it's a complete change of consciousness. First of all, that we are sacred beings or divine beings, part of the whole divinity of life. And then if we abuse this wonderful creation we're a part of, we're really acting in a sacrilegious way. And I think that could bring us on to nuclear weapons, which is the second bear, I think.
Good. Yeah. So I know you've written recently, or you have spoken recently about nuclear weapons and the morality or immorality of that. So what is your response to that?
Well, my response really was trying to point out that the amorality that we're stuck in comes from the split between spirit and nature in the Abrahamic religions. They don't realize it, but what they've done over the last 2,000 years is to separate matter and nature from spirit. So naturally, when it came to 1945 and splitting the atom, we didn't realize that we were actually doing something sacrilegious, going against the sacredness of matter and life. Matter is essentially spirit. And how could we realize it then? We've changed so much since then in our understanding. But then we were trying to compete with Germany, get in there first, and then having made the weapon, we thought, wonderful, this is going to give us great power. We're not going to give this up. And so we now have 9 nuclear nations who are not going to give anything up in a hurry because they're stuck with the illusion that it gives them power. And I'm talking about, in that video I made, about this illusion and where it comes from and how we can counteract it, which is, I think, by realizing everything you've realized in your book, that the earth is sacred and matter is sacred, and putting up these weapons are diabolical, really. That's the word that must be used, diabolical or demonic. They're not saving our lives at all. They're threatening the whole planet, and with us as well. And it's just ridiculous. It's part of the insanity of the whole way we think, that we've been trained to think for 2,000 years, really, that God is something separate, distant.
Yes, and it's that separation that is the first clue to take us on a bridge from where we are to a new era, a new way of being. And on the other side, we feel, first of all, the connectedness. But, as I have talked to people about the theme for today, almost everybody I talked to said, what is the theme? And I'd say, well, we're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about nuclear weapons, and we're going to talk about prophetic hope. And almost without exception said, oh, we don't want to talk about nuclear war. And that's because it's so horrific.
Yeah, it is.
But if we don't talk about it, we're doomed to be in it.
Well, that's why I think we have to look at the morality of what we're doing and what we're allowing our governments to do in the illusion that they're protecting us. And it's up to the Americans to say these weapons are not protecting us, and up to the English to say the same thing. They are really taking us on a path to destruction or self-destruction. And that's why we need to look at what's happening with North Korea and America and the sort of ridiculous exchange between them, like two toddlers having a tantrum, really.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. It's something I comment briefly on in the book, that the problem with global political leaders right now is that they're largely uninitiated males. That is, they haven't been initiated in it beyond this split into a more connected way of seeing things. And because they're uninitiated, they tend to act, as you say, like toddlers, and the conversations on that level. I want to point to something in the book, get your response to it. The indigenous elders, many of them, particularly those who witnessed the development of the atomic bomb in New Mexico, they saw that immediately as a watershed moment. They saw that as a turning of the world from one civilization to the next. And they had a lot of discussion. One section of the indigenous people, they wanted to just retreat and keep all of their wisdom to themselves and let the rest of the world kind of go its way. But there was another group that said, no, this is the moment when all of the wisdom traditions of the world have to come together and face the fact that with the dropping of these bombs, we have lost the paradigm that we've been in, and we have to go on to another.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that they'd done that so clearly, but they have spoken out, and they are speaking out. The Kogi Indians are speaking out too, to what they call their younger brother, elder brother speaking to younger brother, saying, listen to us if you want to save this planet and save yourselves, really. And they're still speaking.
Yeah. I wanted to mention, since you're, and I'm circling back a little bit, but I know that you're you're a Jungian scholar and have insights there that are very valuable to us. But I wonder what you think about that moment that Carl Jung visited Taos, New Mexico, and he was conversing with Ochiwe Abiano, and he asked Ochiwe what the indigenous people thought about the dominant culture. And in a famous moment, Ochiwe said, "We think you're mad." And Carl Jung, being a little sensitive because he himself thought he was psychotic at times, he was sensitive to that. And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And Ochiwe said, "Well, you all run around with your faces pinched and your lips are thin, and you think with your heads." And Jung said, "Well, what do you think with?" And he didn't say anything. He just pointed to his heart. So I'm wondering, I know the Jungian community is somewhat divided in the way it thinks about that moment, and I wonder what your thought is about it.
Well, I think it's absolutely spot on, that chief who spoke to Jung, that we think with our heart. This is what we have to move to. We have to move from our head to our heart. And that was really the first awakening in Jung, that something had to change, perhaps in him as well. It went very deep into his psyche. I'm not so much in touch with the Jungian community now. I'm really out on my own, making my own path, as it were. But I've been deeply, deeply affected by Jung's work and his insights, because he was the person who really brought the soul back into the culture against huge ridicule, opposition, the same kind of opposition that we get now talking about climate change or nuclear weapons. So at every stage, there are individuals who need to speak out, understanding what they're being told, perhaps by someone like an elder, like the chief who spoke to him, and like you did, with bare heart, and listen, take it on board, and change the consciousness, which has been mad, really, for a very, very long time. I think we've been mad probably for 2,000 years.
Yeah, yes.
Longer, when you think of all the wars, the great empire building, all the business, and the sacrifice of thousands and millions of young lives for nothing, just power and aggrandizement and territory. And maybe it was a phase that had to be gone through, but that phase is over now. And we really have to move into another way of living and thinking.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And before we finish, though, I want to ask you this question, and that is, given massive climate change and given that the proliferation of nuclear weapons and given the lack of political leadership, do you have hope? And if so, what is your hope?
I do have hope because I have confidence in humanity. I have confidence in the deep wisdom which is there, and which perhaps just a handful of individuals on this planet can hold for the whole human community. But I do have hope. It may be that there'll be some shocking event which will precipitate an awakening on the part of governments and on part of the millions of people who are still sound asleep. And I don't think we can even speak of hope without there being hope already. So I think we have to trust the very fact you bring it up.
Yes, the subtitle of your book, Dream of the Cosmos, is A Quest for the Soul. And your presence really embodies for us a sense of the soul. And that's where I find my hope.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Anne, so much. And we'll shift now to some of the lovely people we have to respond to the conversation that you and I have had, and also to this book. And again, thank you for the writing of this monumental book of your own, Dream of the Cosmos. And I look forward to being with you again. And just to say to all of the people who are here is Anne often joins in this conversation as a participant, and it's a great honor for us to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that was quite a conversation with Anne, and what a wonderful person she is. I want to turn now to what I might call a poet of nature-based earth consciousness with Carol Flake Chapman. And Carol, by the way, we're having a party here today and sharing computers. So here we go. So glad to have you, Carol. Your response to what we're talking about.
I'm so happy to be here. And there is an old saying that you find the teachers you need when you need them. And Anne Baring, I came along when I needed her. And I just thank you, Anne, for being such a source of hope and illumination. And Will is the teacher that I found when I needed him. It was almost like finding the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, or Will finding their heart under the tree. It just these things happen when you need them. And I didn't even know the title of Will's book. A few months ago, I was in New England in a wonderful retreat center in the woods, and there was an old overgrown labyrinth there, and nobody was using it because it was all sort of muddy and wet and cold out there, but I was really drawn to it. And so I went out there, and it was covered with apples, little apples that had fallen from a tree above it. And I started walking it, and I came to something that I knew what it was only because I had lived in Vermont, and we had bears there, and there was a pile of bear poopy right in the middle of the labyrinth. And it was just one of those amazing moments. And then I thought, oh, that's great. And then I thought, ooh, where is she coming back? So I continued walking the labyrinth, and I heard these words, walk with the bear. That's what I heard, walk with the bear. And so I wrote a poem about that experience, which I'd like to read now. And I call it The Bear in the Labyrinth. The old labyrinth was overgrown with moss, small yellow apples fallen from the tree, making bright bumps in the carpet of muddy green as I walked the twisting way of the pilgrim there on an autumn New England day. I walked in silence and empty mind until I came upon a pile of what could only be bear droppings, with seeds glistening like jewels. And I stopped, then looked around, startled at a crackling in the woods, imagining a return. I wondered if she kept to the path in her ambling, as she smelled the fallen apples in early decay, and whether she ever made it to the center, but meandered content on the edges of the pattern, though she herself was perhaps the center I was seeking. So the tradition of the labyrinth was preceded by the maze, which goes back to Minoan civilization on Crete. And Theseus made his way to the center of the maze to find and slay the monster, which was the Minotaur, which was half beast, half man. And I would turn that around and say that rather than slaying the beast, half man, half beast in the center, we embrace him and become part of the wild ourselves and cease looking at the wild and the beast as an enemy.
You know, what a poem. I mean, I just love that. And you and I, in fact, were walking, and you mentioned this poem, and I said, wow, do you know what the name of this book that I'm writing is. and
Yeah, synchronicity. And that's a good Jungian experience where Jung said, you know, these things, these coincidences, it's just that we don't know yet how to connect them, but they are deeply, deeply connected.
Right. So that's a powerful connection with the theme and also with the book. What are some other observations, responses to Anne and me, or to the book, or to this moment?
Well, it's really interesting to ponder what it is that causes an awakening. As Anne said, you know, millions of people are still asleep. What is it going to take to wake us up? And somehow, for me, it was inklings or glimmers from nature. And it took, though, walking with Will and becoming part of the Earth Tribe and finding some affirmation in these glimmers that I was experiencing, because I'm a longtime journalist, and my inner skeptic is very strong. So, you know, it's like you have the two wolves battling inside the bag. if you have an inner skeptic and an awakening, let's say, mystic inside of you, how do you reconcile those things? And Will's book is certainly a way of showing his own path as he battled his two wolves inside the bag. And so that's an inspiration to how those of us who come from the establishment in different ways, how we reconcile that with these glimmers that we have. And what an amazing idea that nature could have an interest in us. That okay, I talk to all kinds of creatures out, you know, when I'm on a walk, I talk to everything that I encounter, but that they might answer back, that they might actually be listening, that they might have an interest in our awakening. It's extraordinary.
And you've had a moment or two like that.
Many moments like that, actually. One thing, you know, the white buffalo is such a powerful symbol, but shortly before my husband died, unexpectedly, there was a black deer that was born in my backyard. Even more rare than an albino buffalo, the black deer, a melanistic deer. And I didn't know what to make of it at the time. But clearly it was a symbol. And there was other things that were happening at the same time. And in retrospect, I realized that nature was bending towards me. And, you know, it's an extraordinary thing. And it's not something you find it easy to talk about at first. It's important to find a community that is on the same path toward that bridge.
Right, and that's really the heart of our getting together here on these first Saturdays is having a circle, a community where we can talk about these things. And even though this is going out, and eventually I guess it'll be on YouTube or somewhere, but the fact is, it's giving ourselves permission to be who we really are. That is, partners with nature rather than observers.
Yeah, that connectedness is going to save us.
Yeah. And I might say it's probably the only path we have, because this upheaval is coming from the heart of nature, and therein we have to find that connection that also comes from the heart of nature in order to find our way. Yeah. So good. Thank you so much for being with us, Carol. And I think I'm going to award you Poet Laureate of the Texas Hill Country.
All right. I'll take that.
Okay. Good. All right. So now I want to shift over to Oregon and talk with Angie Azur. Welcome, Angie.
Hi, everybody.
Well, we've got several themes going on here, Angie, and so let's just begin with your response to the book as it was reading it. Before we get there, I just want to mention to everybody that you're a prominent participant, owner, expression of the Paleo magazine.
Yes,
And
Paleo magazine. Yes.
yeah, good. So
The book really had a lot of similarities to what we try to live like. You know, your earthing. When you talked about earthing, that's a big thing we're doing in Paleo, is trying to get back to nature, get your feet in the dirt, get your hands in the dirt. Yes, so definitely the book resonated with me there. But I took so many notes in this book. I'm like in love with it. So yeah, I resonated with so much of it. And on page 18, I actually quoted this: "If you are sick, walk in the forest with the person you think might connect you to the forest." So many of my friends have something going on sick-wise, like mental illnesses or heart issues or stomach things, and it can't all be the food. I think it's lack of connection to our nature, to Gaia, to where we're from, what we're made of. And when I was younger, I was in nature a lot. I grew up on a farm back east, on a blueberry farm, but I had a very abusive family. So I would take my little sister and we would go out into the woods, and nature saved us. You know, deer would come up to us, birds would sing around us, trees spoke to me. And I lost that connection, you know, as I went to school and got into the mainstream of work and life and became a mother. And just recently now, finding you, Will, and all of these, sorry, my phone is ringing in the middle of this. Just finding this book is really, is bringing me back. And yeah, I'm going to talk to trees again.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You saying you grew up and you had some trauma and abuse, and you're walking in the woods. And this is a point that Carol was making also, that it's not just you communing with nature. It's actually the sacred web reaching to children, in your case at the time, and seeking you out to offer healing.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that back then because I was so little. But just recently I was questioning, do I have anything to offer nature? Because, you know, we had talked about being sharing with nature, and I'm trying to like understand that in my head. What can I actually offer nature? Because I don't really think I have anything. But I was talking to a local shaman here, and he said, just go talk to a tree. Just tell the tree your story. Just sit down and connect within to the spirit that is right behind you and has your back and, you know, is standing strong for you, and just let them feel you, and you'll give something to that being. And so I'm going to do it. I haven't done it yet, but yeah, I really think, yes, your book needs to be out there in the world, and people need to connect back to nature. It's how we're going to move forward, and yes, in love.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. What you have to offer, Angie, and what we all have to offer is who we are, and opening ourselves authentically, just who we are, telling our story to the trees, to the rocks, to each other. That's what we have to offer, and it's a beautiful gift.
Yes, and nature has so much to offer. I mean, there's so many plant medicines out there. There's just connection, there's beauty, there's calmness. And you know, my husband, since he does own Paleo Magazine, they do a lot of research, and one of the things they just found out is children with ADHD, if you put them on medication, you know, their levels come down so they can, you know, be in the world that we've created for them. But if you take them out into nature, their levels come down the same. It's just like being on that drug they're giving these kids. And that's where they need to be. They need to be in nature. Nature cures everything.
Yeah. So I want to mention something along this line of expressions and having these experiences that awaken us. Do you feel comfortable with with mentioning that very distinctive dream you mentioned to me when we were at Teotihuacan?
Oh, the very crazy one that isn't from me.
Yeah.
So I don't have it pulled up here.
Well, just tell a little bit about the dream.
So what's interesting about, I've been having really crazy dreams in the last 2 years, a lot of really amazing dreams that don't sound like me. I don't speak in the way the dream comes out. It sounds very different, very like bigger than my vocabulary is. So I know that it's not just for me, it's meant for everybody. So many of them are about all that is bigger, bigger things. And I didn't grow up in a church, so I don't even have a background in any of this. So when these dreams come to me, I'm just floored by them because I don't know how to understand them. I don't know what they mean. And that's why I brought that one to you. Yeah, I can't even get, that one's so big. You have to read it. It's the words, I can't say them.
Maybe we'll have another call down the road because also you're a visionary artist.
Yes.
Note, and that's really important. But what I wanted to bring up in the context of today, in terms of finding prophetic hope within this maelstrom that we find ourselves, is that you have a sense, if I hear you correctly, that you're getting dreams that are not originating in your own psyche.
Right. They're not anything that I've learned or know of or can even understand. The one that I sent you, that's why I brought it to you, because I thought, what does this even mean? I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wrote that down. And then when I got back up the next morning and I was reading what I wrote, I was like, what is this? Yes, just things that are not of my brain or of my being here on earth. Maybe it's
and that's a major theme I'm exploring in the book also, is that we have a waking self, our ordinary little self, as we call it, and then we have this nighttime, which is basically a lot of time, the night is where the dreams and visions often come. And so bringing them together is at the heart of our hope, isn't it? Getting them more friendly.
Well, and what I want to do with it is I know I'm an artist, so one of them is behind me. I have these dreams of this heart in this tree, right? So then I paint it or sketch it and then create it bigger, because I think it's for everybody to see and to share, because they're not ideas that I'm coming up with. I'm not sitting down going, oh, I really want to paint this. This is a dream. This is something that came from up there, downloaded.
Yeah. Can you bring that painting over and bring it up to the computer?
It's just a sketch. It's one of my sketches. But yeah, I have there's a being that comes and visits me a lot in these dreams, and I sketch her.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then there's one on the wall over here,
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah, so I draw them, and they tell me things. So I put it out there on Instagram. I put it out there on Facebook because I don't believe it's for me, and maybe somebody can learn something from them, or raise up the vibration of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, well, I think part of what's happening right now is somewhere in the not too far distant future, we're going to need to have a Saturday when we focus on some of Carol's poetry and some of your paintings, and just luxuriate in the creativity that's coming up. And that again is where our hope resides. At least at this moment, I'm feeling that. So it's just great to see you, Angie, and really you sent me a couple of copies of your magazine, and I really appreciate the work you and your husband, Brian, are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for talking this morning.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to switch our attention now up to Boulder, Colorado, to our good friend, Carol Bennington. And so Carol is the Dean of Students at the Fox Institute, and so glad to see you on this fine day, Carol.
I really appreciate being part of this circle today.
Yeah. So one of your specialties of research is the world of plants, and I wonder how you take that perspective and bridge it into the book.
Well, I have to say, thank you for writing more of your story and sharing it. I enjoyed your storytelling method because I felt like it was being in conversation with you once again, which I've missed greatly. So, of course, that's the lens I read the book through. And so I'm really excited. And Anne and you both said that, you know, plants are here for us all the time. And they're willing to connect with us, sometimes even when we are unaware of being present. So it isn't always having to be present, at least in my experience. So bottom line, and there's so much I could say, I believe the plants give us hope for the future. And I see the biggest role plants offer for us, or one of the huge roles, is they help us to be more resilient. So my background is in, or my focus is in the different aspects of plant and flower healing, and it's specifically within that flower remedies or flower essences, which is the energy of the plant that matches with our emotions. And so different plants offer us different healing aspects. And so there are flowers that can help us when we're feeling down or when we're feeling hopeless. But in my personal experience, in daily life, as well as when I've gone through dark nights of the soul or more challenging times, the plants have always been there, and they have my back, and they help bring out my best to go forward. And so they offer that to everyone. And then, like you and the oak tree, I was really excited to share that story, because I've had plants, specifically trees as well, give me messages, sometimes when I'm seeking and sometimes when I'm not. In my experience with plants, they have different personalities, just like our friends do. And I sort of use the analogy of how to approach plants, like you mentioned and outlined very well in your book. I give the analogy of friends. How do you approach a friend? With respect, and giving time to a friend, and reciprocality. And I really love in your book that you talk about that it's a reciprocal relationship. And often when we talk about all of creation, we forget that plants are part of all of creation. So I'm really, really, really excited that you added those aspects in the book. So
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I thought you might like that. As I brought together visions through all of these decades, so many I don't want to mention them, that also connecting that with the Hopi visions of the rock, the prophecy rock, and so on. If you look on the cover of the book, you'll notice that there's a bridge that comes from one of the lines down to what Carol in her Choctaw background calls the bright path, or the red path. And as a human comes down from this abstract split, estranged pathway, as we come down to this path of consciousness, we land right in the middle of both upheaval and a beautiful world of plants. Yeah, so let me see if I can point it out. Yeah, but it's backwards. I can't count 12, but you can see the plants right there. And that's a beautiful thing, that through the thousands of years, in the visions of many indigenous people, they saw that the fifth world is going to be one where the divine is revealed primarily through plants and not people.
And I find the gift of plants is they have so many different ways to offer it. Like in your book, you talk about just holding the plant was one way of connecting with the plant. But each form of plant medicine, or each type of plant, offers different ways to connect. And it's pretty amazing. And just being present with a plant, the other key thing that you said and Anne said earlier is your willingness, just to be willing to connect with the plant and open to it. It's amazingly simple if you're open to it. It's like greeting a new friend.
Yeah, just a headline or two about healing you've experienced with a plant in your life.
Well, there are so many, but one as far as communicating, which was like a predecessor to that. I was living in Flagstaff at the time, and I'm Carol. I'm a confessed tree hugger. So I was hugging a beautiful ponderosa pine in a city park. It wasn't even out in nature by itself. And I was going through a discernment time of deciding if my marriage was going to make it or not. And so I was not the nicest person at that time in my life. But anyway, so I was hugging this tree, and no sooner had I hugged it, I got this really strong message said, well, of course you're angry. You're going through grief. And I had never considered that, but it was like duh. And anyways, and that was a total paradigm shift for me, because once it was identified, then I got nicer and I could deal with it and know how to move forward. But that was one of the gifts of like similar, at least in my opinion, of your oak speaking to you. You know, that was that tree's personality just said it like it was. It didn't, you know, it just told me like it was. But I have gone through so many different experiences with plants, because the different forms I use them in are either herbal or botanical medicine, essential oils, which is the physical part of the plant, homeopathy, and then in the flower remedies, which help balance our emotions. And so they have helped with my evolution. They've helped give me support and be less fearful when I'm going through a fearful situation. They help me have courage to do what I need to do when I'm not always necessarily wanting to do that. But what I have found is my relationship with plants, they become my best friends and my allies, and they always have my back. Somebody else mentioned that term, as plants have your back, and that has been my experience. And of course, with more time, I could go into more detail, but I'm also aware of the time. But plants have just, they are under the radar sort of how powerful they are. And I really appreciate your prophecy of that connection, because they have connected me to my soul in a way that I could have never imagined.
Right. For most of us, this is a radical notion that humans in the coming world are not going to be the center of things, but rather we're going to be an aspect, a partner, a collaborator with the web, and that there is a strong tradition that in this previous world, the divine was revealed through Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Mary and so on. And there's this tradition that the message you got in the city park in Flagstaff through a common pine tree is going to be somewhat the norm as we evolve to the next level, where we get insight, where we get relationship, where we get wisdom that comes to us from the plant. So it's much more than communing. It's an actual active relationship and communication. So thank you so much, Carol.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I think we've got time. I want to, I'm looking at the chat and I see Amy Blumenstein from up in Minnesota. And I see Roderick Chambers. I don't know where Roderick is. I don't know if he's in China or where. But Dan, is he available to bring up? I'm going to bring Roderick up because his comment, he said, I finally got my copy today. Woohoo!
How's it going, Will? So I don't have much lighting back here, so I look completely shadowed and dark, man. So
hey, you're coming from the shadow world.
I am, and I feel like it right now.
Are you in China, or are you in subtropical Houston?
I'm still in subtropical Houston. I'll return back to China after Christmas. I finally got my paperwork in, so government has approved me to come back to China. So
that's good. That's good. Yeah. So just a sentence or two response to our call today, as you represent many people who are on the chat and also participating.
Wow, man. Honestly, I don't even know how to respond. I'm glad that I finally got my book. The last phone call, I did mention that I was having the dreams about brown bear and what have you. And so I brought that into my meditation time, at least what I believe to be brown bear, because it was a brown bear. Yeah. And so it's really expanded me in a lot of ways. But I'll be honest, man, in conjunction with many things that are happening right now, I think I'm just getting life from the phone calls and listening to everyone. So I really appreciate everyone just being able to share in their freedom. Thank you, Will, for creating the space for us to be ourselves and come to terms with who we are and connecting with nature. Because I will say that nature has been a healing factor for this phase that I'm encountering right now. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And talking about future conversations, we were in a sweat lodge this morning, and we had a former Baptist missionary who's now living in a Buddhist monastery. And so he said, I'd like to have a conversation. And I know you've had a journey through various forms of consciousness. So maybe we'll have a conversation somewhere down the line.
I'm completely down for it. You let me know when.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us today. And this is an important day, and I'm so glad we could share it, really, because this book, I spent a lot of time meditating and connecting with the larger sacred mystery about whether I would even publish this book, because in some ways I feel pretty vulnerable about it. But I'm happy that so far I'm getting some response, and some people respond one way, some people respond another way, but it's wonderful for me to share it with you. And particularly, I want to share it with my partner, Judith. And before we finish, well, but we see the chat there, but they don't see it.
They don't see it.
Yeah. So I'd like for you to bring us to a close, if you would.
Yes, I'm going to sing a song. Might not be surprised by that, but it seems to fit with everything that you've been speaking about. So this was a song from the Earth Tribe. It's one of our members of our Earth Tribe. The Spirit is in the land. We have come to walk with the Spirit. The Spirit is in the land. We have come to walk with the Spirit in the land. Send us a voice. Send us a voice. Send us your voice, Wonkan Tonka. The Spirit is in the land. We have come to be with the Spirit in the land. The Spirit is in the land. We have come to join with the Spirit in the land. Hoo-ha. Aho.
Aho. Come here. So we just want to say goodbye and say big love to everybody from our hearts to yours.
And I want to tell, what's her name? This person?
Angie.
Angie, I'm an Oregonian, born and raised in Oregon, lived in Portland, Eugene, Roseburg, everywhere, went to the University of Oregon, so howdy. Go Ducks.
Hello, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.